First let me answer your question about going outside of the Ethiopian community, meaning the non-Ethiopian consumer. With that, yes, we're going to have, it is not going to be just like injera that we eat, because as I said first, the injera we eat mostly what is fermented like 3-4 days. That is what really Ethiopian like to have their injera, 3-4 days fermented injera. But the one that I would like to venture to the non-Ethiopian consumer, because the first thing that the first comment I hear from them is, wow, it is sour. So which means we have to take out the sourness. It is, like for example, when we talk bread, mostly because, in Europe or in the Western world, they have all this, the characteristic is defined scientifically. Whereas when it comes to injera, we haven't defined, to this date we said, oh, kuffala, boka, like, it is ready to cook, but it is something we inherited from our grandparents and so on. It is not something that we bring to the business. But what we're trying to do is like, we are measuring the pH level, the temperature, the moistness, all this. If you apply that, now you're bringing something scientific to the product. When you do that, that is when you can apply control. Meaning, what kind of pH do people like, non-Ethiopian, what kind of pH they like. We have sampled this. In fact, there was an Italian from Rome, he came, and then we put all different pH, and then he selected and said, this is a pH that I want. So yes, we have to differentiate it, but still, we want to have the characteristic of injera, because, let the world know injera. A food is also a great way to introduce culture. Yeah. So let's introduce our culture, which I think injera is a fantastic product. In fact, another thing, I don't know how many of you know this. For example, in the US, like, I don't know, there is some, there is this fermentation that we need for a digestion. Like in the US, there is, I don't know where you're from. California. Okay, there is like in Whole Foods, they have this kombucha. Now when we think, in kombucha, like in this drink, there is fermentation, right? So even now we start to analyze what is the fermentation does. For example, if kombucha is fermented, what is injera doing, to our health? The more we do that kind of scientific test, that is because we don't know injera that well. We just eat it. But now we want to bring injera, to the higher level. So through that, by studying, now we can produce according to, when you know a product, that is when you're able to tweak it according to the customer that you're trying to target. So that's what we're trying. As far as like quality, what you do when you're shipping, the number one thing, especially with food, how you prepare it.
Just so people know the question. The second question was the logistics associated with injera. So the injera is arriving fresh in the locations, and so it must be a logistical nightmare to try and get that. And so the second question that Rahel is answering is to do with that.
Yes. So the number one thing is, how do you produce your products? Because that also has an effect on the quality when it arrives to the consumer. So you have to control your manufacturing place, how you manufacture. And after that, right now, luckily we're using Ethiopian Airlines, because Ethiopian Airlines fly direct, and usually, it is when it is in the compartment of the plane, they put at a certain temperature. So because of that, it is controlled. And usually, since it is an ethnic food, the Ethiopians, they know when it arrives, you open what you want to consume. The rest, most of the time, you can freeze it. And because now there is a daily shipment, they can buy small and they can eat daily. That also helps to your logistics as well.
Great question. So with the aspiration to one day be bought out by a bigger company, how do you balance the wanting to leave a good contribution to the country with a business you set up, and then as you hand that on to another company, how do you ensure that that mission that you originally have remains?
I'm sure this question comes because I said I want my company to be bought by a bigger company, right? You know, when we're talking about this thing, we're talking about in another 10, 15 years. So by then, which means the culture of the company has been set. So the way, maybe that is part of the negotiation. You know, the company, whoever is buying my company has to continue with the culture that has been established. So that is one way of, through negotiation. And the other thing is when I say somebody to purchase my company, honestly, it is not about, oh, I leave the company. No, that's not my wish. Or that's not my aspiration. My aspiration is I will be part of the company. But now, one thing what I learned is, if you want to be big, be with the biggest one. That is the idea that I have. It doesn't mean that I just abandon the company. But now I am what I am right now. I'm aspiring to grow. But eventually, as I said, I want to be the leading in the industry. If you want to be a leader, you have to be with the bigger. So that is the aspiration I have.
Great answer. Okay, I think we have time for one more over here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And my one question is, do you have any plans to export Portugal?
Believe it or not, I have not mentioned, but we do. Yes, we do.
Wow.
Yes, we do. Why, you deal with that product?
It's my people's food, so yes.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite foods, so yeah.
You can come and see how even we pack it. It looks like a biscuit.
Oh, very good. I didn't understand anything that went on there, but something good happened.
The root means it is something from a banana leaf.
Aha.
It's made from a banana leaf. Especially in the Gurage tribe,
okay.
It is like more than injera,
wow.
which they consume with the pitfall. And especially during the holiday time, it is like soaring the order.
Amazing. Oh, that's so good. I love that. So finally, before we come to a close, I would love to ask invite you to give us one last statement around if there's someone in here who's either at an early stage of their business or they're thinking of setting up or they have an idea, but they just need, what would you say to them? They maybe need encouragement or advice. What would you say to someone who is thinking about setting up and has come today?
I'm taking this from my bottom of my heart. The road is bumpy. Let's stick to it. As I said earlier, think that the first 3 years, don't think how I'm going to make money. Because sometimes, the biggest mistake we do is when we focus on the money, that is when we lose quality. Because by any means, in order to make the money, you start adding something which you're not supposed to. So don't focus on the money. Money will follow. Trust me, really, I mean this. Money will follow. But do the right thing. Another thing is like, when you come to any business, if anybody takes only the good thing, please make sure to ask what are the difficult aspects of this business. Because for every business, there is a downside. For every business, there is like a mountain of problem. And I will tell you something also. Before you start the business, let's say in the West, like in the developed world, you go to, for example, let's say you become an investor. You said, I want to invest. You know what the first thing they do? In order to say this is a kind of investment you need, the first thing they will ask us is your, I think they call it temperament, meaning like what can you do or what can you sustain? So you can be in aggressive or you can be in a very slow one. Just like that, ask yourself, what is it that you can do and what is it that you cannot? This is what I tell for most people. When somebody tells you at 3 a.m. in the morning, there is a fire, the next day, are you going to quit your business? Because it happened to me. So if somebody tells you like all about the glamorous part of business, don't trust that. Because the first, especially in our environment, information, as I said, you have to come to the network side because information is not out there easily, like You Google and, oh, you know what, I'm going this, let me Google. It's not like this here. So all I will say is, more than anything, yes, finance is good, the support is good, but the number one thing you have to ask yourself is, how am I going to sustain when there is that, like, something happened to my business? And also, try to gather yourself with positive people. And another thing I will tell you is also, if somebody says, oh, you know what, this business is not working, I started and I failed, you don't know why they failed. Don't think it is the business. It could be the personality, it could be that person. So don't go because somebody's telling you, ask your gut feeling. But more than anything, what you need is, yes, money is good, the support is good, but at the end, remember, you are the decision maker. So all I say is, when you try a business or whatever you try to start, the first thing is ask yourself, am I able to do this? Am I able to sustain when there is a downtime? The more downtime, you know what? Downtime, by the way, doesn't mean it's going to end. No. Today the problem is here, tomorrow it's another problem. Today I tell you about, oh, you know what? I came to this far, I employ these people. Did I say, oh, anything is rosy? No, it is not. I tell you, there are so many issues that I have to deal now. But one thing I realized is, every time my problem keeps changing, that is when I know that I'm growing. Thank you.
Wow, can you hear this, Rahel? Hugely inspiring words. We are so grateful that you could join us. We know how busy you are. I just want to be taking notes right now, but I'm busy interviewing you. But I can get online and watch it all, as can you. That's a little plug, mala.org, if you want to see this back. But we are so grateful for you. Can we hear it one more time for Rahel?